Hello all, welcome to our talk about bridging the distributions and services used on this. I'm František, I'm product owner of the Packit team at Red Hat, and I'm joined now by Dan.
So, hi, I'm Dan. I'm a software developer at SUSE. I've been there for quite a while, and I do software development in all kinds of parts, and yeah, so this is a cross-distro, cross-company, whatever. No?
It's on, it's just very quiet.
No, I think we don't...
And a lot of complaints about the services.
Okay. So, just again for the recording, I'm Dan. I'm a software developer working at SUSE. So we've made a cross-distro, cross-company collaborative effort. But now back to František.
Okay, so actually what's ahead of us? So we would like to take a look at the Fedora infrastructure around builds, then shortly describe the Packit projects and how those two things come together, and then finally what we can do on the openSUSE part. And then, since some of you might have seen me talking about that on FOSDEM, so I would like to do a short history lesson because this effort is taking some time already. And finally, what you can play with now and what should be ready in the future. So let's start looking at the build structure of Linux distribution, like and it might somehow fit to this. So usually we have some kind of source control, so containing the package metadata. Then we have a build system. From the build, we need to compose somehow the repository, so some source of data on the whole distribution level. We need to provide some artifacts, so image build. Then in a good distribution, there is some kind of QA happening. And then the last step, the crucial one, we need to get it to the user, because without that, it doesn't make sense to do all of this. And also, it might be worth looking at the relation about packages and do some monitoring. So how it might look like on the Fedora board. So as a source control, we have a so-called dist-git, as the name might suggest. So it's a git, and for each package, we have a Git repository, and for each Fedora version, we have a branch there representing that. Currently, as a UI or front end on top of that, there is a Pagure used, but the project is slowly moving towards 4.0. As a build system, we have actually two. One is the Koji that is like built inside this pipeline, but there is also Fedora Cooper that acts as a user-facing build system, so anyone can run RPM builds there and can also provide the repositories. If you are familiar with the Ubuntu space, so PPA is probably worth mentioning there. Then there is a Punji used for assemblance of the images and composes. And then we have actually two systems for QA. One OpenQA on the compose side, body updates kind of is on the package level. So there is, before the package gets to the user, to the final compose, there is a karma voting going on, so people can vote if the update is working or not, maybe. Then some role also is played here by Koshei that does the reverse dependency rebuilds, so we can check these. Okay, now about Packit. If you don't know, Packit's goal, the project of Packit's goal is to bring upstream, meaning the GitHub, GitLab, the developers, closer to the distribution. So we have two ways how we are doing that. One is providing the downstream feedback closer to the upstream development, so ideally have a direct feedback directly on the change. So if there is a contribution to the upstream project, directly you will break it when it gets to the distribution user. Then there is an opposite direction, and that's the automation of the release process. So make it smooth when upstream releases a new version of the project, so it goes smooth as possible and quickly to the user through the distribution. We have a bunch of ways how we are trying to help that. So the first part, the feedback, is that we are providing a GitHub and GitLab integration. And you might see the familiar logos here, and that actually shows how Packit actually works. So it's standing on top of these services and providing a user-centric workflows on top of these. So for your pull requests or commits or releases on upstream, you can run RPM builds, either as a buildability check, but also to provide some user-facing stable RPM repositories. You can run tests on the VMs that has these RPM being installed, so you can mimic the environment where your package is actually already on the system. There is newly also an OpenScanHub integration that allows you to run static analysis, also on a differential basis, so you see only the new findings. And there is a prototype of VM builds through Image Builder. On the Fedora side, we actually need to move this a bit and leave there space for upstream, which is where actually the new release starts. We don't only need to think about the distribution itself. So first step is getting actually the new release to the dist-git. So we have two ways how we are doing that. So one is the push workflow. So if you have the GitHub or GitLab integration, you can do the React on the releases and do the push. But usually or sometimes you can't do that. So there is also this pull workflow. So thanks to Anitia and upstream release monitoring, we can be notified about upstream releases and do this pull workflow and configure it from the dist-git side. Both these results in a set of pull requests with the spec file and all these files in dist-git updated and source uploaded to local-site cache. Once this pull request is reviewed and merged, there is a Koji build happening, and if there is a successful Koji build, we are creating a Bodhi update. Okay, but what about openSUSE?
Yeah, so odd one out. There hasn't been a lot of green in the previous images. And that's because openSUSE's build system is particular, especially when compared to something what most people. So when I look into the room, I see mostly probably Fedora RHEL faces, not too many openSUSE ones. So in case you want to have a deep dive about the different build systems, I've made another talk about this, the differences of the whole build system. And because that one already was short on time, and so if you want to get the full picture, take a look at that one. But to give you the short summary. So the talk wasn't called the monolith versus the swarm, not only because of StarCraft, but also because the open build service, that's the main build system behind openSUSE, and that's one giant monolith. So all the stuff that's happening on the Fedora side with about 50 different services, and that's also partially because there's duplicate ones, but that's a different story. All of that happens in the build service in one instance. So the open build service is really your catch-all solution. If you want to build a distro in one place, do it in the build service because it can do all of that. It has its source control built in. It can do package builds, not only RPM builds, also Debian packages, Arch Linux packages, Alpine packages since a few weeks ago or months. It will do VM builds, it will do container images, it can build repositories to a certain extent. If you want to have Delta RPMs and stuff like that, then it's a little bit more work, but it's all in one box. And it behaves differently. So for instance, the version control is different, peculiar, and interesting, and it's sadly not Git. So I know peculiar, interesting would also apply to Git, but it's unfortunately not Git. That's a giant pain in the rear, but that's a different story. The remaining part here, once everything goes into QA, that's all done by OpenQA partially because we invented this stuff, so we better use it. Okay, so, and I nearly forgot the most important feature. So in case you're a distro developer and you're building stuff on Koji and you are really fed up with manually resolving dependencies, the build service does it for you. That's really the one killer feature. It resolves dependencies automatically and rebuilds packages automatically for you. And it does that across VM builds, for instance. So in case you decide you want to build a container that's based on Fedora or on openSUSE Tumbleweed, and one of the packages in the build root changes, it will rebuild the container for you. You don't have to do that manually. If one of your transitive dependencies of one of the packages in your container changes, will rebuild the transitive dependencies, rebuild the package, rebuild the container. If you want to do development, that's great. If you want to develop a stable distro, not so great. But again, different talk. So I might have mentioned the challenges a little bit, and the biggest one is its own version control. And that's a big, big nightmare because Packit was made with the same assumption that you are committing stuff into a Git repo. And that unfortunately doesn't apply here because someone decided 15 years ago that building your custom version control system is a good idea. I disagree with them nowadays, but well, what do I know? I wasn't there back then. So that's quite the challenge because this version control actually just exposes an XML API and you have to talk to it, and it doesn't support all the Git operations, and that's actually quite the nightmare if most of your code is structured around the idea that you can do Git operations. Another interesting challenge is OBS really lives its configurability. So there is nothing like a global build root. If you have ever built stuff in Koji, you tell it, here's your source RPM, rebuild it in Fedora 39. In OBS, you can configure whatever you like. If you want to mix and match openSUSE and Fedora with the 5 different releases, knock yourself out. You can do that. And that makes things also a little bit more interesting. And in case you want to override a few distro macros, sure, why not? Here's your tools, play around. Great if you want to experiment. So if you want to do some experimentations, nice tool. If you want to have stuff all working all the time, not so great. Yeah, that's also what I mentioned. You can configure everything to your liking, and that's in principle a feature, but sometimes it can become a little bit of a pain. Yeah, and XML, well, I have a personal grudge against XML, but then again, I have that against many things. So at least there's an API. If you see that list and my ranting about it, you might ask yourself, well, why should we bother? And especially given that the major feature, which is automatic rebuilding on transitive dependency changes, isn't really something that we need in the Packit context, but there's the other thing. The build service supports not only Fedora, not only CentOS, not only RHEL, but also openSUSE, SLE, all the Ubuntus, all the Debians, anything Debian-based. It can build any RPM-based distro. It can build Arch Linux packages, Alpine Linux packages since a few months. So it was implemented earlier this year. Maybe if we're crazy enough, we'll get this GSOC for next year for OpenWRT, but no promises. And it can also build other deliverables. So you can build virtual disk images, you can build container images, and that's all in one system. And that's potentially rather interesting because you can also build VM images for Ubuntu, for Debian. I don't know if anyone tried for Arch Linux, but it's possible in principle. So, and then we go into the history lesson, which starts with me getting apparently very, very bored.
Yeah. So as you can see from the dates, it's taking quite some time, and maybe even longer before, because on various talks we talk about Packit, it was usually at least one question. either please support all the distributions or please support OBS. So, but we didn't have the time and to prioritize that or even take a look. But the reasons why to do that were there. And suddenly there was this PR by Dan. So yeah, it was really nice. But a couple of weeks onwards. And yeah, there is this PyOBS and a lot of work being done on the API side and the client. And yeah, still 2 years ago. A lot of the discussions happened afterwards. And yeah, moving more. I think you've seen reviews like that. Just a few comments. And looks like we will be merging in a few days. Still a year and a half today. Okay, so now starts my role in all of this. And okay, so I've spotted that openSUSE was participating in GSOC last year, so I wrote to Dan that what about sending this as a proposal and maybe some student will fix this for us and finish that, because we both doesn't have much time to finish this, but it would be really awesome to have it. Okay, so it actually happened. So Brian took the work by Dan and started working on that. It was a really nice summer, but actually the summers are usually quite short, so it wasn't possible to finish that. So summer ended, and my crucial role on that. So yeah, hello Dan. Yeah, there is this call for papers proposed them. What about sending that there, and maybe we will have motivation like before Christmas. There is a lot of time, and we will take a look at that. All right, yeah. Okay, so actually Dan managed to took over from the work Brian was working on that was taken by Dan, so returning back to the original author. And actually, yeah, it happened. This screenshot is not from today. It was 8 hours before the FOSDEM talk, so actually made it right away. Yep. And now you can play with that.
Yeah, so how does the thing all work? And that might be the little bit underwhelming part, because it's relatively simple-ish. So as I mentioned, the actual nasty part with getting anything into the build service is when I started poking into Packit, I realized, yeah, there's a lot of assumptions that you're committing stuff into Git, which, as I said, sane assumption, problematic with the build service. But there's a shortcut that you can make, and that is Packit also offers, allows you to create a source RPM out of your project that it generally uses to fire off builds. And because Copper and Koji both are really centered around this idea that at some point you create a source RPM and then you rebuild the source RPM, something that the build service really doesn't do that much. And so, yeah, let's just hack it. So how about we build the source RPM, we wiggle it around a little bit because OBS does things interestingly. So let's just create a test package on the build service, check it out using the weird OBS API, then unpack the source RPM into the test package and commit it back into the build service. And that's actually it. Sorry. Might sound a little underwhelming, and it took far longer than it maybe should have taken. But yeah, so that's how the whole thing works. Bypasses a good chunk of the OBS ugliness, thankfully. And if you want to give this a try, well, all you have to do is install Packit somehow via whatever means you like most. So if you're on Fedora, just DNF install Packit, or from PyPI, or from the Copper repository. And you have to configure Packit yourself. And for the additional catch, you have to create an account on the build service. And please use build.opensuse.org and not another instance, because I haven't tested it with a different one. Because they are all so different and so configurable, so I can't guarantee that it will work. You have to configure it correctly, and then we can try a live demo, and it will probably fail, but we can try. So what we have here is just Packit itself. So let's try the self-hosting stuff. And that is Packit build itself in OBS. And we actually have a stable internet connection, so maybe it will work. Yeah, so it checked out our package, sending stuff there. It's currently building Packit. That looks good. And now it committed our stuff in the build service. Well, it's still sending the data. Ooh, nice. And now the package will build itself. So as you can see, there's this, I specified the no wait flag. If I omitted that, then it would wait for the package build to succeed. But that might take a while. So let's go back to the slideshow. So there's a few additional options. So you can build it in a different project. You can build it with a different owner. You can wait for the build to finish, etc. pp. But that's really all there's currently, and there's a bunch of stuff left to do. So first would be the build service handles change logs that are typically in RPMs differently. It puts them in separate files that are in a different format because of reasons that I don't know, but it's there. So we had to. The current implementation uses regular expressions, which I don't like, and could be done better. Then submissions on the build service. So essentially, if you send something into the distribution itself, that's what you do with merge requests on Pega, but not Git, so different mechanism. That would be really nice, because then Packit could itself send updates to openSUSE properly, which is also kind of a requirement for the last part. And then in the far future, maybe builds for different distros. But then again, yeah, Packit is really centered around the idea that we have something RPM-based, and ripping that assumption out might be even harder than ripping out the assumption that it's Git-based. But then things are still brewing, and so this is a screenshot from the mailing list, also from a while ago. And that's about Git migration. And yeah, this has been a long time. I was involved in that, but the project is still going, and it looks like we finally, I mean, soon is a very undefined time frame. So apparently it's more than, I don't know, 4 months. But soon we will be migrating fully to Git, to Gitty. And the idea is the following, that the source control in openSUSE will finally not be this crazy custom-made thingy, but we will have Gitty for handling sources, so it will be Git underneath finally, thank God. And that's pretty nice also from the point of view that Fedora is currently moving to ForkJo, and hopefully the APIs haven't drifted yet. So that means that we can essentially kill 2 birds with 1 stone. We'll just once we implement merge requests on Pega in Packit, on ForkJo in Packit, and submit sources there, we can hopefully apply the same logic to openSUSE, and then do this stuff. So essentially, we won't have to do any additional build service futzing, more or less, anymore, and we can just commit our sources to Git, put that in the build service, rely on the build service niceness, and well, the rest of the stuff we don't care about that much, at least on the build service side. So that's hopefully the future, if, or let's say when this Git migration finally happens. And with that, we also have an open discussion on GitHub. So if you have further ideas, feedback, or just want to give us a few thumbs up, and say, yes, please do this, then please find it there. This is us. Thank you for attending this talk. Thanks for being here. And now we have time for questions.
I'm worried to ask.
So the question is whether the version control system is really custom or based on SVN. It's really custom. So the official client pretends to behave like SVN, but it's custom. So try creating a subfolder, a subdirectory in a package on the build service. It doesn't work. It creates an archive of that subfolder. You can do subfolders in SVN. I'm pretty certain of that. But so it's really a fully custom thing. It has interesting things like constantly floating rebases of your package against a different package, which sounds insane, and it sometimes is, but it has some interesting use cases, but it's a really custom thing.
Anyone would actually want to try that? Anyone would find this useful from the audience? Once this is put into the service? Maybe. Okay. Yeah. Usually our priorities work that we need like the demand, and then we can maybe spend the time on this. So just to know. Thanks. Tim?
Yeah.
Just to make sure I understood from what you were saying, so for the builds in OBS, that supports having the spec files upstream? It doesn't have to be in OBS, or are those downstream builds where the spec file and everything is stored in OBS?
So the question is whether the spec file has to be in OBS or whether it can be in the upstream Git repo. So currently the way it's thought is that you have the spec file in the upstream Git repo, and you let it generate via Packit, and then it just gets put into the build service.
But there is a way how to work around that, or a lot of people didn't like putting spec file in upstream. So there is also we have these customizable actions, and you can, as the first action, download the spec file from OBS, Fedora, Git, or anywhere. So both ways actually work.
So getting into a very high specific use case, is it then possible to have spec files in Fedora's Git build RTM
We would need to, repeat the question. If it is possible, if it would be possible to use the Fedora spec files and use them to build in OBS.
Assuming that the spec file will build for SUSE in the first place, I just meant the storage location.
Yeah. I think the
face has answered my question.
I haven't tried that.
No
idea.
We can try technically, or locally. Definitely we can try that. When speaking about service, we would need to think about how this needs to be triggered, to get it together. But yeah, interesting. Let's try it and break everything. Maybe not.
Put it in the GitHub issue or in the discussion as a potential use case. That would really help, because I'm gonna forget in 20 minutes.
There you go.
Yeah, so in Fedora, you can basically outsource entire package maintenance on Packit, we use for our packages. Is this possible for openSUSE packages, or is this mostly for
So the question is whether so that in Fedora you can essentially outsource the packets, you can outsource package maintenance to Packit more or less, and whether this is possible to in openSUSE, and the answer is unfortunately not yet. So hopefully at some point, yes. That's why we also started working on this, but currently it's not yet possible. So currently really you can kick off a build of a package, but it will not send, it will not update the package in the distro. That's not yet possible. So hopefully once the Git migration is over, we can do that. Then it should be relatively easy-ish.
Looks like no questions. So thanks a lot.